o'clock. Welcome back, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning. Welcome again to CUHK Law. Welcome to the conference on the role of the law of unjust enrichment in Asia. This conference is, I believe, the first ever online conference on unjust enrichment in the whole world. And as Dean, I'm of course delighted that CUHK Law is again a front runner here. We are very proud to have with us some of the leading unjust enrichment scholars in Asia who will be presenting at our conference today. And we are particularly grateful to Professor Michael Martinek, one of the best known unjust enrichment experts in Europe, to kickstart the conference after my welcome remarks with the first presentation, to lead us into a day of hopefully exciting presentations and thought-provoking discussions. Many thanks, Professor Martinek. We know it's very early in Europe. Thank you for joining. We have altogether 300 registrations for this conference, and we have right now 118 participants who have joined online. Who would have thought that the law of unjust enrichment is such a hot topic? Now, more than 75 years ago, Lord Wright reminded common law lawyers in Fibrosa Spolka that every civilized legal system must have a law of unjust enrichment. In 2004, the late Professor Peter Birks ended the second edition of his famous book, The Law on the Law of Unjust Enrichment, with the sentence, "No system can manage without a law of unjust enrichment." But why would you write a whole book on a topic, the existing of which is so much in doubt that at the very last point, with the very last sentence, you need to reassure everybody that the book was not written in vain? In fact, some commentators are still arguing that a law of unjust enrichment simply does not exist, and others, like Professor Niels Jansen, have told us that we need to bid farewell to unjust enrichment. Despite these contrarian views, of course, the law of unjust enrichment is recognized in all modern jurisdictions. However, as we know, details are very fundamental aspects are still discussed and disputed everywhere. In particular, the role of the law of unjust enrichment and the aims it tries to achieve in different jurisdictions appear to be rather unclear. Now, unjust enrichment is, of course, even less prominently discussed in Asia than elsewhere. And this is probably for the simple reason that unjust enrichment law is less developed in this part of the world. Having said that, this makes it, of course, even more interesting to talk about different aspects, to explore the role of the law of unjust enrichment in Asia, and that's why we are here today. This conference is organized by the Obligations Lab Asia, which is a cluster group of the CUHK Law Center of Comparative and Transnational Law. And in addition to what my colleague, Professor Diaz-Simoes, had mentioned earlier, I wish to highlight that it is the mission of the Obligations Lab Asia not to just do mainstream research, but to challenge traditional positions and conventional wisdom so as to trigger reflection and ultimately, hopefully, legal innovation. I would therefore like to encourage all the speakers and the participants today to feel free to think out of the box. Let us try to look at unjust enrichment law from different angles. Let us try to explore if there are new ways forward. And for the sake of good discussions, let us try to be provocative and outspoken while keeping our manners, of course. A good debate is always beneficial to all parties. We are grateful to the editors of the Chinese Journal of Comparative Law for having agreed to support this conference, and special thanks go to Professor Liu Chao, who is one of the editors of the journal and who is also a speaker today, for all the cooperation and for agreeing to consider the conference papers for a special edition of the journal. Special thanks also go to the other speakers, of course. We all know that these past 8 months have been, or 6 months have been quite disruptive. And it was rather difficult in light of COVID-19 to stay happy and to move forward. And that's why we are quite happy to see you all here today. I wish to thank my colleagues who have agreed to chair the panels today and for ensuring that every speaker will stay strictly within the time allocated. We have a very tight program and panel chairs will be strict, but they have promised to mute speakers only as a measure of last resort. Last but not least, thanks go to Professor Steve Gallagher and Bonnie Long, my co-organizers of this conference, as well as to all the admin colleagues who, for the superb support since we started this project about a year ago. I will stop here before we start two housekeeping announcements. For speakers and all participants, if possible, could you please turn on your video function? Also, if you're just listening. I'm asking for this favor because as a speaker, it's much more pleasant to talk to a real audience rather than just talking against black boxes. Thank you for helping the speakers. Furthermore, after every session, we have a Q&A session. If you have questions, please chat them in, use the chat function to send them to the panel chairs who will then help to convey the message to the speakers. And this will hopefully generate a very nice discussion. Now, I wish all of us an exciting conference day. And with this, I will pass the virtual floor to Professor Abhay-Ratne to chair the first panel. Thank you again.